Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of hashtag Blind Talk. I am here with my co-host. Hello, TJ.
Hey everyone.
And our special guest for episode 8, Alison, Disability Rights. How are you, Alison?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. And my name's Allison DeFranco for people. I have put that out there a bit more, so I'm happy to share that.
Awesome. DeFranco is a very Italian name.
It is, yes. Yep.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Where were you born, Alison?
I was born in Middletown, New York. It was a cold, snowy day. No, uh, yeah, I was born in Middletown, New York, which is maybe an hour or two from New York City. And we moved up. So my father is originally from the Adirondacks. My mom met him in college when she was visiting, and we moved up here when I was pretty young. So I don't really remember living there. But yeah.
And so you've lived in New York most of your life?
I have, in terms of where I grew up and stuff, I did live, for college, I was in college in Maine at Bates College. And then I came back to New York in terms of going to law school at Syracuse. And then my first job out of law school was in Washington, D.C., and then Boston. So yes and no.
Right.
When I got to the point that I could move back up here, I had at the time when I was in Boston, I just had enough clients. I was doing enough, and I was traveling so much. I was in as an international human rights lawyer, for people who are just meeting me or seeing me for the first time. I would be traveling, and I'd be in huge cities: Jakarta, Indonesia, Mexico City, Mexico. Just places that were so busy, and I loved it. I mean, but for me, I'm not really great in big cities, and it
Yeah.
just got to the point where it's like, hey, you know what? When I'm home, I want to have the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So yeah, I decided to
Absolutely.
move back up
Yeah,
here.
Awesome. Well,
nice.
let's kind of start your journey by talking about, I guess, your diagnosis is the first port,
Yeah.
and tell us kind of how that came about.
Yeah. So when I was, let's see, it was eighth grade, we went to New York City and we were just checking out the shows and that type of stuff for spring break. And I remember my mom one night just asking me, why was I holding a book so close? And I said, oh, I can see it better. And just sort of that was a progression of something noticing with my eyes, because a year before in school, I had tested at 20/20 for both eyes.
Right.
Um, and then in ninth grade, at the beginning, the first parent teacher meeting, my biology teacher told my stepdad that, she's not looking at the board to take notes. She's looking at the person next to her. And, it seems like there's probably something that she can't see. So any attempt for me to sort of be like, it's nothing, it's nothing. He came home and told my mom, and
You
it
were
just
busted.
yeah, exactly. And it just seemed like, okay, we're going to go to the eye doctor like everyone else does at that age, or everyone else does, right? And you're just going to get some sort of glasses. Um, yeah, that wasn't the case. So the first eye doctor at the local level, and right now it's hard for me. It's sometimes I think people, I'm impressed, but I guess because I'm so far into my journey where I'm like ophthalmologist, all the different things.
Yeah.
Um, but this is like local small town, I think, ophthalmologist. And within a minute or so, he looked in and was like, huh, I've never seen that before. But, he was really good in terms of bedside manners, in terms of being like, maybe something, I'm going to send you to a retinal specialist over in Burlington. It's probably something that might just require some steroids or something. So
Sure.
really, there wasn't any real alarm aside from the fact that I was like, where are my cute little glasses? That's what I came here for.
Right. Our glasses will solve everything, surely.
Everything.
That's it, right? You're like, come on. And so many people over the years have told me that too. So,
Exactly. It's a gift that keeps on giving.
so the next appointment was, a little bit different. It was,
Yeah.
it was somebody I am part of the reason I sometimes can be a little bit like, oh, is it an ophthalmologist, an optometrist, oh, this or that, is I didn't necessarily have great experiences. I think that what happened this next appointment was that the person also had never seen someone with Stargardt's. And he pulled my mom to the side and said, you're going to need to connect her with blind services. She's going to be completely blind within 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
And, that was really put on her to have to tell me. And at the same time, he's saying something like that, but he's also saying, hey, I have a friend in Oregon who might have seen Stargardt's before. I've never really seen it. So to me, I got to say to this day, you haven't seen it. Why are you dropping that kind of
Right.
information? You have no idea what's going on just because you're like trauma shock, trauma shock.
Right.
Um,
But that's a
so
constant theme, isn't it? I mean, like,
Yes.
we've talked to other people, and TJ, you've been through this too, where man, you think about, okay, here's the diagnosis, and to your point, Alison, like, it's true. If you don't know about it, why are you saying these things to people? And
Hmm.
it's just a constant, and still today, it's a
yeah,
constant challenge. And I just think that's a common theme. So
it is. Yeah.
if you're just entering this phase and you're just dealing with a diagnosis or a loss of vision, especially because of retinitis pigmentosa or Stargardt's in a later
Hmm.
part of life, don't panic, and don't take the
Yes,
first thing that you hear. Get a second
Hmm.
opinion, like we talked about before. It's really important.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, that happened then. That was in November and December. I know that that particular eye doctor was on the phone with my mom, and she to this day is like, yeah, I heard him turn to one of his colleagues and say, "Oh, I have another mom crying." And I just remember that was a couple of months. This was my freshman year of high school. I was on the varsity basketball team. I was the leading scorer. I remember a lot about basketball that year. I don't remember anything. It's like almost like my brain has blocked it out to protect me on
Hmm.
about my vision journey until April when we did see an eye doctor that's in. TJ is going to relate to this. If you want to go watch the New York Yankees, you don't want to see a minor league game, right?
Right.
I I went down to New York and I saw a major league, one of at the time six doctors that was really equipped to diagnose Stargardt's, had been both on the research side and the diagnosis. And I did get the diagnosis of Stargardt's. And it's almost like that's where things start coming back in terms of like, okay, this is the world.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
And
but
how
yeah,
did that new doctor address that earlier doctor's diagnosis of going blind in 3 to 6 months? Did you talk to the new doctor?
a little bit. I mean, obviously concerns and things that I think he had seen before, and that, first off in the profession, that's um not okay, and somebody
Yeah.
who's very professional and kind of assuring both my mom and me that that's not what it should have been. But also sort of like I said, it's like the minor leagues need to relax a little bit, they need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm with you on that. And I think that what I have found in the medical profession, because I have been on the other side of that,
mhm.
is I often feel like they should approach it in a better sense of saying, I see something is there's
Yeah.
something there.
Yep.
There's a definitely, yes, you are losing your vision for a reason. There's a little bit something more to it. However, I'm not exact. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to say, I don't know what it is truly.
Yeah.
That'd be like you going for, say, a tumor in your stomach and them saying,
Sure.
yes, you have this big tumor in here and it's cancer without doing any other test,
Right.
and dropping that on you. It's along those same lines. So I really think that
Yeah.
that aspect could be changed a little bit more, where they could ease it in a little bit easier and say, listen, if you don't know, don't know. And that's fine. Send me to somebody who does.
I totally agree, and I think also as someone with endometriosis, it's in the medical field, there as well as I think that there's a certain amount of I people, doctors and that and professions need to show this confidence that they need to know what they're talking about, and at the end of the
Right.
day, if they don't, that harms people.
Right.
I know
Right.
as a lawyer, if I started telling everyone I'm an expert on property law, let me help you out with your easements, no,
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
yeah, but because it does cause a lot of what is going on, a lot of confusion. At the time, my mom, in
Yeah.
that period of time was trying to figure out, this was, kind of funny in that, like, looking back way. I hope she's able to laugh about this now, in that she was going through thinking of taking me out of school and like traveling the world so I could see things before I lost all of my vision in this short period of time.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that when she sees this, I just have to say, thank you, Mom. I've seen the world. You
So,
know,
so you're in high school. You've just seen the good specialist.
Mhm.
What was your plan then?
Uh, in terms of vision loss, it was, this was, well, it was still dial-up internet.
Yep.
So I think, I remember my mom was always trying to look up stuff. We were constantly trying to find out, look up, are there trials? What is the future? Sometimes you'll hear me talk, and I'll just be like, look, I'm no longer there. Because part of my acceptance journey, or really my radical acceptance, was just, this is this. But 28 years ago, there was going to be a cure in 5 years.
Right.
So, but we did do things such as my paternal grandfather had macular degeneration, and mind you, Stargardt's, they had just identified the DNA link 1 year before with Stargardt's.
Ah,
So, some people I see now that are able to like point to what the link is, I'm all like, I'm old school Stargardt's. I don't really know. But we did there to research in Texas. Both my grandfather and I had sent blood for testing. So a couple of different things. Also in October of that year, so when I was 15, only 6 months later, we went to Atlanta and we went to a conference, like a convention for Stargardt's, it brought together people with Stargardt's, which was really cool for me.
mhm.
Just
Yeah.
that first day, I was like, I met other people. There's other people like me. And I think maybe the beginning of me being able to like call it as it is was also demonstrated, because they had a panel of doctors, researchers from Emory, which, is a great research
Yeah.
place. And they were talking about, oh, this is what we found and this is where we are. And my mom refers to it as, it looked like I was stretching. Mind you, I'm 15 years old. And
Right.
like, and as soon as I'm like, so you actually don't know anything and you're doing nothing except talking. So yeah, so that probably doesn't surprise either of you that that was the beginning of
No. Yeah. No.
Allison. But it was really nice to meet people. I mean, I met a 9-year-old there who just made a joke. He's like, I know it's hard. As you guys have the blind spot comes in more, but let me tell you, when my teacher's like not being nice, I just am like, haha, you don't have a head, and because we just
Right.
complete. It's just like walking legs, and some of those things were really really valuable, and I still after that didn't have a lot of interaction with blind visually impaired community until I was about 22 after that. But that's the type of thing, I mean, for anyone who is going through vision loss in their teen years, or any parent who's watching today, definitely, the more connection. And I think that you guys
Mhm.
would both relate. This is why Blind Talk, in terms of the online community we have, is that no matter what age, no matter where we're at, you know, we we don't necessarily connect a lot within our own blind community just because we're hanging out with the sighted humans.
Well, and
Exactly.
everybody's regional too, right? I mean,
Right.
you're both regional.
Hmm.
Jesse
Hmm.
was regional. There's a lot of people living in regions that don't have access to services, and
Sure.
I think that challenge is really tough when you're
Hmm.
starting out as well. So
Yeah.
in those transition teen years, things like the camps that Jesse and I talked about
Hmm.
last year, sorry, Madeline and I talked about a couple
Hmm.
of episodes ago, they were gold for us as
Hmm.
kids,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because then you
Yeah.
did get to talk to other people, and
Hmm.
not that we talked about our vision loss much. We just had fun, and felt
Right.
comfortable with each other.
Sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think your high school years, as you said, you're part of the school team. I played rugby and basketball in high school, in the mainstream high school, until I was about 15. And then my cataracts really made me lose significant vision pretty quickly. And so I had to pivot to blind and low vision sports. But
Hmm.
as I was telling Alison last night, when we were prepping for this, I didn't even know anything about blind and low vision sports for the first 15 years I was alive. And so
Hmm.
it's like you have opportunities, and then you
Yeah.
take advantage of them. So tell me about your basketball journey, and how that morphed over the high school years.
Yeah, I mean, basketball is something I've been obsessed with. I love sports since I was a kid. Everything. I never stopped playing out in the yard. Basketball, baseball, football, everything. But basketball kind of was my number one once I got into it. And yeah, it was really interesting. It was almost like parallel stories were happening. I was leading the league and ranking high in the state even for 3-pointers, not just like scoring, but 3-pointers. So part of the reason I was just really not, there are so many reasons. You're being a teenage girl. I think that in itself is hard enough in this world, but
Right.
a lot of reasons that I was hiding my blindness. But one of them was I just did not want to have something that was I was good at, I was practicing, I loved, every day, how can you shoot 3-pointers? How can you this? How can you that? Um, yeah, so, but I played high school, all 4 years varsity, all 4 years MVP. I was on my AAU team, and I was 15, I made the U17 team. It's just, you couldn't get me out of a court or, outside. I would just be outside all night playing, shooting, so it was absolutely love it. I actually did play the first 2 years of college as well at Division III at
Okay.
Bates College. Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that journey, the transition then from high school to college. Um, what were your thoughts around, picking your major and what that decision
Yeah.
was about? And then how did that transition happen from, maybe living at home? Were you still living at home when you went to college?
No, and actually, there's one thing that I probably, as part of this whole transition, should say that my senior year of high school, I applied to a college, and this is also kind of the beginning, the origin stories of a lot of the things that drive me now. And I was rejected, or early decision, and initially it was deferred. But I did find out through the grapevine, it was because someone on the admissions committee had thought they heard of Stargardt and what would happen if I lost too much vision. I couldn't play basketball. And then also it costs money to provide reasonable accommodations. So I actually found that out in late December because again, it was early decision application. And we had to really quickly scramble. It was a school I should have gotten into. It was a good school, but not a good school, but for
Right.
what it's done. But yeah, but it had to really scramble. And so, this was a clear, discrimination and et cetera, but
Mhm.
couldn't even take the time to emotionally process what happened, let alone bring up the stuff. So the reason I'm saying that is in my application in the few that I did, so Bates and everywhere else, I was equally as open, if not more open in my letter. And I actually spoke to the basketball coach directly as well, just being like, hey, just so you know, this came up. And he was like, I could care less what's going on with your vision if you're shooting like that type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
That was really reassuring. And I like to just be like, okay, because that was a real gut punch to be like, wow, it's not just the day to day, it's like systems, people in this world, I'm going to be challenging me just because of this like new thing, my new disability, my blindness.
So
Um,
let's unpack that for a second because I think that's an important point. That was your first real, probably, situation where you saw discrimination happen. And, TJ, let's talk to you about that as well because we maybe haven't unpacked that with you as well. So, in your decisions to change your role and separate from your career to a degree, like what was the first time that you felt discriminated against or judged because of your vision?
Honestly, I have not had that happen for me. When I left my career, it was on my terms, and it was because I didn't feel it was safe any longer to continue to practice. I mean, I ran ventilators, which are life support machines, for a living, and you got to be able to see to be able to do that, and see clearly without any doubt, and also not being able to see in dark and dim lit situations. I worked a lot of evenings and night shifts. And so it just wasn't anything that was beneficial for me to do. And I didn't feel like I could do it safely. So that was the decision for me. When I started helping my friend out, and I still do at her office, I was very upfront with her and said, listen, I do have this and this is how it goes. There's a bunch of unknowns. I live every day not knowing how I'm going to be able to see, but I'm willing to help you out, and and do what you need and fill that role for you in your office. And she was like, I don't care. I could care less. And if it gets to the point where you can't see good enough to get here, I'll come get you. Like, I don't care, so I can't say that I've ever experienced that from, in the job field.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for that because so many people don't get that kind of accommodation, or they don't get to leave their jobs on their terms. And that's disheartening to hear.
And
It's
so,
really disheartening to hear about your college
yeah.
acceptance experience. That's
so how did
awful.
that frame you, Alison? Like that was probably your first, or one of your first points about discrimination and dealing with that. How did that frame what your thought process was?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was my first experience of legitimate discrimination that not just I had been dealing with obviously people saying things, running their mouths, having, to push for getting my tests and everything in a certain way, but just a clear cut, could this have been something that we brought up as a legal form of discrimination? Yeah, it was my first. It again, I had a basketball game that night too, and I did not play well. These people not just deferred me, I did not play well against one of my rivals. And if you guys can tell, I'm pretty competitive, so I'm mad about that
Yeah.
too. I'm mad about that too. I only scored 8 points. Anyway, no, I think
I love that you
that
remember how many points you scored.
I have
I
a
know.
real, I have a very good memory, which I know last week you spoke with Jesse Evans about as well. Some of that is just I probably would have had either way, and some of it is now it's just constantly every piece of information. Yeah,
Memorizing.
I know so it's naturally. Yeah, but I had a very short time period because by at that time you had to have applications in by January 1st. So this was like December 15th or 16th, thinking I was going to get in. So at first it was didn't really have time to process it again. But over time, I certainly think it plays a huge role into everything that happened for me as I slowly started to realize that, hey, this happens. This is real. You kind of have to fight every day for things, whether, some of it's really like, and you will experience full on discrimination that, yeah, I think that was, and again, I still wasn't talking very much. I wasn't advocating for myself. I was really shy at the beginning of college. Um, but I definitely started this to realize that I had, a fabulous mom and so much support. She was so helpful. She advocated for me when I didn't yet have the confidence or know how to.
Yeah.
Right.
And she did it in a way where she wasn't pushy, she did it in that way that was always getting ready for me when she could step back.
Hmm.
Yes.
But I realized that I think what happened is between what happened with the college rejecting me on discriminatory grounds and just realizing all of the little fights that she would have to get in high school and even in college at times. I mean, this was back when my chemistry teacher would say things to her in high school like, my computer's so old, I can't increase the font. I can't print out large font for a test. What?
Right.
I mean, just there were so many things. And I started to realize, I think I was starting to become mature enough to realize that I could have had a different situation if I didn't have the type of support I had. And
Right.
I think realizing that even with support, someone like me, someone like Jesse, so many of us that have this amazing support still go through this stuff. That was when it was sort of like, this is what I think I want to do. Now, how are we going to make that happen?
I think there's
Uh,
pivotal moments in everyone's life, isn't there, where things change and you start to realize, like the advocacy component. And when I coach advocacy to transition students, it's
mhm.
all about understanding the big picture and then understanding what you need and what your toolkit is. And we obviously did a podcast about a toolkit
Yeah.
and what that entails. But more so than ever, there's more tools coming out every day from a
Yep.
technology point of view, and an advocacy point of view that's going to help
Yeah.
people. So, like, we live in a different world now, but
Yeah.
back when
Yes.
we were younger, absolutely, those things didn't exist. And so, you're in college. You made the decision to choose a college that you felt comfortable with.
Yeah.
Tell us about your college experience.
I love my college experience. So yeah, Bates, Bates, Bates. It was first off, my favorite food is lobster. So going to school in Maine, let's just
Yeah.
start there.
You're in
Right.
heaven.
Good
Uh,
fit.
I will say though, I was still in this hiding and masking and passing as a sighted person. I was playing on the varsity basketball team. And I just hadn't come to terms. It wasn't about, what actually it was a little bit, we're at that age, and it's not just about blindness or disability. It's just, I think people go through, society puts a lot on boys and girls, young men and women as to what expectations. And if I could go back and tell myself, like, why do you care what people think? As you guys hear me say a lot, um, it was like, oh, I don't want to be different. Being different's bad. No, it's not. Like then you get to a certain age where you're like, that's so boring to be the same as everyone. Um,
Right.
but I think there was a lot of that. I will say it's important to note for sure that I had some friends who did know and were supportive and actually, they let me it was my story. They knew that. They let me share how I wanted to, but they also supported me. And those are people that to this day I just see as when I say find your friends, you can. So that's definitely why I loved college, and because I wasn't really dealing with discrimination. I had a good disability service office. They took care of a lot of the things for me though, so that's the reason I still wasn't having to step up and do too much. They have a letter, they let the professors know, the professor has to get them the test, and I go and take the test there or whatever. But yeah, no, I really really liked college. I'm trying to think if there was anything. I think there was only one time, just to note, in the employment thing that was really interesting, is I applied for a job as one of the student interviewers. And I did open up, that question that comes up in any job interview, especially when you're, early in your career, professional, right? They always say, what makes you unique and different for this position? So here I'm
Right.
thinking, oh, this is the first time I'm going to open up about something. It actually does make me. And I actually think that's why I didn't get it. Now, I want to be clear. I don't have any proof of that,
Right.
more than the fact that it definitely just sort of the people who had less qualifications for, having working in the admissions office and doing things, but at the time, maybe things that were more interesting to the college in terms of what difference and diversity is. Because I even to this day, I think disability sometimes is just like forgot about. It's like, well, that's, but yeah, no, I had a
So
great time. I studied abroad in New Zealand. I should note that that was the best ever in New Zealand.
How old
awesome.
were you when you
Yeah.
studied abroad in New Zealand?
I was 20, so my junior year of college.
Okay.
And I loved it so much that I actually, between Bates, so undergrad and law school, I took a year off, like a gap year, as you call it, and I spent half of it in New Zealand and half of it in Ireland. So
That's
North Island or
amazing.
South Island?
well, yeah, so South Ireland is yeah, and I did go up and travel to the north,
Yeah.
but I lived in off of Galway on the island of Inishmore on the Aran Islands,
Uh-huh.
and I could quote when it's actually a funny story. I'll clean up the version, but when I met the Irish ambassador to the UN in like 2010, I was like, oh yeah, I lived on Inishmore, and she's like, love, you got to write a book, and the book needs to be titled how the F I ended up on Inishmore. So
Not a prime location, I'm guessing.
just a very very small, maybe 600 people full time year round, and yeah, just how. So,
So you
but
got to travel a little bit.
that yeah.
Just going back a bit, one of the things that I think is really pivotal is that kind of aha moment where you realize that things might be different for you, right? And how you're going to deal with that from an advocacy
Mhm.
point of view. Can you talk about how that's framed you, that some of those early experiences has given
Yeah,
you the foresight in your career?
absolutely. I think that I had to make so many mistakes. I had to go through not being willing to advocate just as a self advocate, just say, hey, I need this. I had to order food that was disgusting. I had to, on my way to New Zealand, at LAX airport, instead of just telling someone at the airport, hey, I have low vision. Can you help me get to the next terminal? I ended up in the middle of a highway, and the police pulled me over and were like, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" And then still not telling the person, and just being like, "Oh, I just got a little lost." And next thing I know, I'm in a garage, underneath. I mean, things that are like it's sort of like a funny to say now, but I actually do think that a lot of the things that I did and failed at because I was not willing to just openly
Open
talk,
up. Hmm.
yeah, have started to build up in me. Like somehow there was that realization. I will say actually studying abroad in New Zealand was probably really huge for me because at the time, there was things they had when I would take the bus in the city. It would talk. It would tell you where you were. Hey, arriving here for this and this, and I had not experienced that before. So there was some accessibility stuff that all of a sudden, was cool. I was like, oh wow, okay. If things are accessible to me, and I don't have to be like hiding the stuff. So it was like a slow process. Then I had friends when I was studying abroad that I was able to open up to because we were traveling around the country, and I I will tell you guys, at least I didn't lie and say I could drive a car and take that on. All right, because
Right.
that's that's how deep some of my hiding it was, that I, probably would
Yeah.
have, but no. So it was just like the slow process that sort of started to, come together.
Yeah. And then when you came back to the US after your year off and traveling, what did that look like for you?
I went to law school, and that looked like 27 years of a good time. No, so for anyone who's not aware, just especially the first year of law school, it's called 1L. It's hard. It is hard. Um, but I think that I was so thankful to a few people, from NFB, National Federation of the Blind, that I knew that sort of gave me a heads up. It's a lot of reading. And at the time I was still using Zoom functions to read. And, people were just like, you need to be able to move over to a screen reader. So what it looked like for me the first semester of law school was listening to, the first case you listen to for this civil procedure. It's a personal jurisdiction case. Anyone who's a lawyer watching this is going to know Pennoyer v. Neff. I listened to 500 times
Wow.
because I had to learn to listen to this robotic, boring. It's not an audiobook, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I say that because that first semester I really had to do that. I couldn't have done it. My eyes would have just, I wouldn't be here. Fatigue, no. But now I can, with the screen readers, because probably know a lot of people who can using JAWS or VoiceOver, whatever they're using. I mean, I'll go through stuff 5 times faster than somebody who's reading it. But
I was sitting in
that's
a
how the
doctor's
beginning.
office yesterday for my physio appointment, and the secretary's like, "Yeah, I'm dating this guy, and he's got dyslexia, so I've transferred from reading to audiobooks, so we could read books together or listen to books together." And she's like, "It goes so slow." And then the girl who's talking to her, she's like, "Well, you can speed it up, right?" And she's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, but then I can't really understand it." And so, like, I'm caught in the middle. And I would just think, real world problems with people who don't have any vision loss. It's everybody's deal, right? And
Right.
sometimes we forget that. Like,
Yeah.
all
Mm-hmm.
these new technologies that are coming out help us so dramatically and are really, for
Yeah.
us in some way, but
Yes.
help everybody now. All the
Mhm.
AI functionality and the voice to
Yeah.
text and all this stuff. Like, we lose sight of that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the curb cut effects, really the idea that there's so many things starting off, the curb cut being a big one that people always will talk about was for people who use wheelchairs, but the benefits towards, you know, people who are just pushing things around, strollers, like everyone. I mean, so many things that is this curb cut effect that it started for accessibility purposes. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's something people aren't aware of, yeah. But
So you're in Syracuse,
yeah.
big university,
Mhm.
law degree, lots of pressure.
I doubled up my pressure because I was like, how fun it would be if I go and get another degree at the same time.
Right.
Uh, in part, I actually have to say, so at the end of your first year, if your grades are at a certain level, there are certain, it's called joint degree programs. You could apply to some of the other graduate level programs. And I doubled down partially, but I also, one of my professors chased me down in the hallway one day. She was a disability law professor. I was like, are you going, 2 days until the application is due for the education program. So I actually, at my second and third year, I was doing both the law school program and my education program.
No pressure,
Wow.
right?
No, no, it was just like, I don't even know how I did that. Like, no, but it,
So
it was, it was fun. It was fun.
was there any like things that you really remember? Obviously, the 500 times revision is one thing, but are there any other things that you remember that really stick out to you about that college life? I know that there's a lot of students going through college in our community now that are
Yeah.
listening, and do you
Yeah.
have any tips at all?
I think that just starting to feel comfortable, especially with professors, to not feel bad to ask for what you need. And I really, even by the end of law school, I was still sort of feeling like I was a burden when I was asking, I would show my professor, here's what my accommodations include. And it was like really not difficult things. It was putting nothing on them, but I would still feel like, oh, I'm creating so much work for them. You're not, people. It's,
Right.
and I want people to know that. And if that's something, but just how much better, and how much more success I had. I was always doing well academically, but when you're actually doing the work with the stuff you need to do it, it actually gets a little bit easier to do, So
Yeah.
Right.
And also
Were
the fact that people in the blind and visually impaired community can, like people may not, especially with law school, like I said, it's incredibly hard, but it is with the accommodations you need. So reach out, learn from other people. I mean, I will say all the time, I graduated 17 years ago before a lot of this really cool technology that now is there. So there's a lot more cool stuff that people can use. I can tell the accommodations I use that were good, but to not fear. Yes, law school is incredibly hard. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of, Socratic method, but it is very possible. And I just want to do a plug out there to say, like, we need more people from the blind and visually impaired community. We need, in the legal field, no matter what you do.
exactly.
Across the board, we need more people with disabilities in the legal field. We need that representation. So,
Right. Did you I guess one thing that I wanted to ask you was when you transitioned into college, were there any other vision impaired students that you were aware of that were in that sector? Because it sounds like to me the college had a good grasp on handling what you needed from,
yeah.
your vision impairment. So if that was easy for you, it almost makes me think they had dealt with this before,
Yeah,
or
I think that's a really good question because there's almost two different ways that it happened. When I was at Bates, so undergrad, it had a lot to do, I would say, with the person that was in charge of the office because it was a small office, that she just would make sure things were done. It's a small
Mm,
school. So
yeah,
I don't know to what extent she dealt with stuff, but she knew how to do her job, do it effectively. And
gotcha.
then I went to law school, and so this is again really for anyone listening. This is something that, as I've heard other people on here say this, make sure when you're looking at colleges and graduate programs that you are looking about at the accommodations, what's available, is there a disability service office, et cetera. Syracuse had a fabulous disability service office. At the time, Syracuse was the only university in the country that had a minor in disability studies, for example, had the master's that I did in disability studies. So there it wasn't just in the law school, it wasn't just in the education, it was kind of around the school. And with that, the disability services office, I mean, I just go in there and get things. So yes, really good. And that's at a big university.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But I definitely think people want to check that out, make sure they feel comfortable. Because you do need to make sure certain things in terms of accommodations and having them on time and
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And each university has a disability support office
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
section. And so it's really important to be able to engage with them,
Mhm.
not just the admissions staff, but go and speak to your disability um, consult in the
Yeah.
university before you enroll.
Abs-
Understand what they can provide, understand what accommodations they can meet. All those things are really important steps in advocating for yourself at an
Yes.
early point and making your college life a lot better.
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. And if I could also just let anyone know who's listening, because I did say I studied abroad, that's also very possible. I was at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Now, that was in a program that was sort of set up through Bates, but Bates had nothing to do with it. When I was at University of Auckland, I was there, and I was working with their disability studies office. And they were great, and I wouldn't have been able to do that. But just so people know that those options are out there as well. Because I've talked to a lot of people who are in the blind visually impaired community that want to study abroad and are nervous. And I get it. There's so many reasons because of the travel, the
Yeah.
this or the that, but you can get the accommodations, um, if you find the right program.
Hmm.
And, and I want people to know that they can do these things.
Yes, for sure.
It's easy for us to let the world try to say you can't. And it's like, no, break that. And even if you're the first to ever, know that we've all got your back. We're supporting you in this.
Exactly.
So graduation, how'd that feel?
That was good. Yeah, I was just dancing in the middle of the dome at Syracuse. Yeah, I know it's pretty awesome to get, to get the two degrees at once. It was, 2009 was definitely a little bit of time of uncertainty, in the economy and stuff. And that's, but I was one of the people who, when I graduated, I did have a job lined up. And that also, was a good feeling. But yeah, no, I mean, I think for anyone, to have a law degree when you graduate, you're like, I did this. How I really don't know. But yeah, it was pretty cool. And at Syracuse, they do have you're in the dome, you're like on the field. So you know me, I'm probably
Yeah.
I was like running around. I was like touchdown,
We need some
three
photos and videos of these
pointer.
things. You need to be able to
Yeah.
post some of this stuff. I want to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like my brother was there, and he's been such a huge support to some of the stuff I'm doing now. But he's 16 years younger, and at the time I couldn't really, by then I didn't have the ability to see out into the stands and see stuff. But a couple of my friends, as they were walking by when they were getting there, they're like, "Dude, your brother is so cool," because he was playing like a Game Boy, I don't know, whatever, D5, whatever. They're like, "I want one. Like I'm gonna try to get him to throw it to me." And it's just like some funny stuff going on as would be at a graduation. Yeah.
That's
So then
fun.
you said you had a job lined
Yeah.
up. Tell me about that. Tell me about how you advocated for yourself to get employment
Hmm.
straight out of college.
Yeah, so it was again, it was hard. There was, usually law school, if it's a good economy, you're going to see a lot of people be able to find, even if it's not their dream job, maybe clerking, research, whatever. And that year, just a lot of my friends right out of law school didn't necessarily have a job lined up. I had two different offers that I was deciding between. One of them and one of the jobs I really wanted, I came in like a second place, which you'll probably know by now. I'm still like, what? Uh, what? No, but I really thought it through, and one of them was doing international law, disability rights. However, it was the first project that I took on. I was a director in the practice was a National Council on Disability report. So as you may know, NCD, contracts out, has grants out to the who does the research and the this and that. And this was one that was looking at how U.S. funding for overseas programs was inclusive or not towards disability. So that was gave me the opportunity. We were looking at the State Department, USAID, and Department of Defense to the extent that there's development programming going on. So really, I'm just coming out. I'm this 26-year-old lawyer, and I'm getting to go to the State Department and meet Judy Heumann every week because at the
Right.
time she was the special advisor on disability. And that was pretty cool. Like just to have that.
Yes.
But also, it's over at USAID and I just, even Department of Defense, the development teams in different parts of the world. I mean, it was pretty interesting. As a 1 year project, we looked at 22 different countries. And it had this whole, the legal analysis of how do our laws apply versus how do the international laws in a country that has ratified, let's say Australia with the CRPD, how do we have to, with our funding act? So I was really getting into like the nitty gritty of some stuff that helped me learn a lot about that industry. So, and at the same time, I got, kicked into the deep end, and I didn't know if I liked it at the time, but I look back and I'm like, okay, that was a good thing. Is that some of my other projects, one of my first projects 2 months into my job was going to Mexico City, and I was running a workshop with human rights lawyers. Mind you, I'm 26 years old, okay, and I'm a white American woman, don't speak Spanish, and many of them are really high level lawyers, but they did not, this was a training on how to write alternate reports and then working with them on an alternate report about the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And we had great, I was so nervous. And the first day I didn't really realize some cultures have different time zone and when they come in. So I got even more nervous when no one showed up for the first 2 hours. I was like sitting there like,
You're like
but that,
they saw who's doing this, and they're like,
that's
no thanks,
that's what I
not ready
thought.
for Allison.
That's what I thought. They were like, "Oh, we have this junior person coming," and but once it started, and that couple of days was, it was amazing. And then a month later, I was in Zambia for 2 months working with disability groups to put in their, recommendations for amending the Constitution of Zambia, as well as drafting a disability law for the first time at the national level. So I got a lot of really cool experience from on the US side and
Yeah.
international really quickly. And yeah, that was
So
and I got
did
yeah,
you pick that degree because you loved the travel? Was that an
no.
influence at all? No, it was.
I know I was really thinking at the time that I was going to law school, and I was when I was doing the master's in education, I really thought that I would be really focusing on like children with disabilities in school, and working with parents, representing the kids, like so Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and Section 504 stuff, and then transition, to college and just get really in the education front, and just that there were not that many opportunities that year. I also thought that I really was interested in direct representation, which I will say between my second and third year of law school, I worked in Budapest at a place called Mental Disability Advocacy Center,
Hmm.
and we had collective complaints. So that's what we would call in the US a class action
Yeah.
against Bulgaria. And I really, that was kind of my first, wait, hang on, system level reform. So it's, because anywhere in the world, we're sometimes just tackling the individual one case, one case, one case. But 95% of what I see is things that really need to be the system.
Now I have
Uh,
to ask you about Budapest because that place holds a special
mhm.
piece of my heart. I was the Australian youth girls coach, and we won the world championships
Ooh,
in
wow.
Budapest in 2017 with
Oh,
my youth
wow.
girls team, and we beat Russia in the final. And Russia had won the previous three world championships and been undefeated.
That's
And
awesome.
it was all of our first. It was all of our girls, except for one, first international tournament, and we won the whole thing. And so Budapest holds a special place in my heart. What did you remember about Budapest? What stuck out to you?
Oh man, the food, the beauty. I mean, Budapest is a beautiful city. Hungarian kitchen is unbelievably good. It doesn't get the credit that it deserves because sometimes people, like, if they come to the US, they'll, be able to sell the product, they might say that they're of a different culture from around the region. But like, wow, the food, I absolutely love. There's a lot of parks in Budapest, so
Yeah,
places that, especially in the summer, you could be outside. It's in a culture where in those parks they'll have the beer tents, and you can just have
yeah.
a beer and sit outside and pretend you're kicking a soccer ball. Um,
Architecture,
yeah,
right? Going
I,
up the
I
river
like
with
that.
all the bridges and just seeing the
So
castles
beautiful.
and
Yep,
the
absolutely.
bathhouses, and it's just an amazing city. If you get a
It's
chance to
really
go, people, definitely go.
I would say it's a top five city in the world for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
And I
cool.
also had the experience on the work stuff was great because our team that was at the time where Mental Disability Advocacy Center was hubbed, but we had cases and representation going on in Eastern Europe, Central Eastern, Russia. So I had some of my cases where Georgia, my big one was Bulgaria, as I said,
Yeah.
some in Slovakia, but it was just cool because we had people from these different places that were like the directors.
Yes.
So that was interesting. And, I got to see some of the things firsthand on human rights stuff. So to answer your question yeah, as well, I would say it's a little bit of once you've seen it, you can't walk away completely. So
Yeah.
the first time I went into an institution and I saw how they were treating the children,
Yeah.
um, it was like that's, but again, I wasn't necessarily my plan, just all how it worked
Yeah.
out.
I mean, even like that country, Hungary, so ravaged by World War II and the Germans, and such damage to that country. And I remember going down by the shore and seeing the shoes by the shore.
Yeah.
And man, that's powerful. Of families just trying to escape,
Yeah.
the Germans in World War II. Like
Sure.
so much history for human rights.
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and actually, it was interesting because when I was there, they had been told the Hungarian government had been told by the Human Rights Council, you like no more institutions. Stop it. I mean, which is everyone's being told that now. Not everyone's listening,
Yeah.
but because I was a student and they my boss asked if I could go and do a tour, and then you know I went in and it was just kind of I'm trying to like think of the way to say this, but as a student, I wasn't there as a student attorney or anything. I
Yeah.
mean, I
Very
saw
confronting, right?
they they electroshock therapied somebody like in front of me, and they were like, "This is a good treatment." This is when we're years into, probably 10, 15 years into that form of torture. So it's like a lot of parallels going on in a city
Yeah.
of history, beauty, how they're paying attention to different things that they're being asked to do. They truly didn't believe that that was go wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, I learned a lot there. So yeah.
So all through that, pretty confronting travel and work and, being out of your comfort zone, there's two things I want to ask you. One, imposter syndrome. A lot of people have talked about, imposter syndrome, and you just talked about feeling out of your depth in certain instances. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of people with blindness and low vision, that they don't belong and, they doubt themselves and self-confidence. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say I'd have to think about that a lot more. You'll have to have me on another show.
Okay.
No,
Some
well,
follow-up videos we
yeah,
can
just
look
like
forward to.
no, because I think that that is something that was really real at the beginning of my blindness journey.
Yeah.
In terms of in my career, um, I think I would point more towards just the cultural, the gender in many of the cultures I was working in, the color of my skin, some of those things.
Yeah.
Mind you, the interesting thing is actually where I started to really come in and feel like, okay, to start talking about my disability was in 2014 in Myanmar. So about 5 years into my career, um, there was a group of like 32 people. It was the first time ever in Myanmar they were trying to organize a national disability conference to advocate for the adoption of a disability law. And I'm sure most people are not too familiar with Myanmar, which is formerly called Burma. But this is a country that's got so many different ethnicities. It had been rife with civil war, or all types of stuff. But the idea of having people from every region of the country was a big thing. And they weren't necessarily trusting outsiders. I mean, they had actually told someone before I came, I was like the third person that they had tried to work with them. They were like, we don't want another white American who's just going to come here. That type of thing. And it was very interesting because the first day I'm in this meeting, you guys need to picture this. The power goes out. It is like 120 degrees, no power. We're on like the eighth floor of a building. I'm like, but I am sitting there thinking, and I'm like, what can I do? What can I do? I'm hearing some of them just how much they want to get done for this conference and what they need to do on, getting the draft law ready. And I finally was like, probably just having a little bit of heat, like a overdue. But I finally was like, okay, let me just talk about myself. And I really opened up about my disability. And it was so interesting because I had no clue that that's all I had to do in some instances, and that talk about where I had been and to where it was like, oh, wait, this creates commonality. And that's where, again, you'll hear me always be like, we're all one, we're one movement. It's not like disability ends at a border, just so everyone
Right.
knows, like
Right.
you get on a plane, I still go over the border to Canada or whatever, and my eyes still are like, nah, we're not working, um, but yeah, no, it is real. And I think like the syndrome for me was probably much more earlier on. And I've taken those lessons to try to give back and explain what that was for me. But again, for anyone in the blind, visually impaired community, like the stuff that I'm talking about for work, this is all I have other friends who are blind, visually impaired, who also have done this type of work. So it's like I think the mindset I'd really want to let people know is, if what you want to do, let you know, let's see how we can help you do it.
Yeah,
Um,
I know personally maybe 4 or 5 lawyers in Australia with total blindness.
mhm.
So they're totally blind, and they're very
Yeah,
effective lawyers. Have had really long, good careers in law, and so
yeah,
these are things that you can do. I think one of the things that I liked about your background story is you're probably always a very curious kid, right? You always wanted to find out about things and ask questions and learn, and that helped you with your study. I encourage that with
yeah.
teenagers today because we kind of are in a bit of a period in the world where it's okay to like not do things, and
Yeah,
I don't like that.
I
I'm
agree.
like, okay, if you really want to have a life that's rewarding and fulfilling, you need
Yeah,
to push yourself, and you need to be able to
totally.
find what you're passionate about. It can be anything that you're passionate about, right? We're
Hmm.
talking about law and what you liked, but and obviously TJ with medical, you're always probably attracted to that to some degree and caring for
Mhm.
people, which is awesome. And I've been through corporate careers, I've been through sport, which I love, and now I'm my own business, and all of those things I was really passionate about. So find your passion, be
Yes.
curious, Ask lots of questions, network with people. Like these are the things that were going to help you in your later life that I think we miss out on a lot.
And
Exactly.
so true. Yep. Yeah.
I love that I still in my field I can still consult with, because my eyes have failed me. My brain has not failed me. And I say that to people all the time whenever they're like, well, do you keep up with your all of your certifications still, and you're still fully licensed, and you keep up with all your CEUs and all the things? I'm like, yes. Did you think that because my vision was
Yeah.
failing that I just lost all of
Yeah.
the knowledge that I had? Like, so I'm still very much intertwined in healthcare with consulting things. And, as you all know, 2 weeks ago, it came in very handy with Lee being,
Yep.
having an emergency. So it really and truly, those things that just because I navigated it differently and I had to, give it up, it was strictly because my vision was failing. It had nothing to do with the amount of knowledge that I still had and still have. And who knows if one day, I'm able to be able to see again and get back bedside, then that's, I still have all of my credentialing. So, I
Well,
worked very
you
hard
might
for
need a lot
that.
of consulting in the future if, heaven forbid, Tarantovirus gets out of hand.
Oh,
So
Oh,
wow.
might go
Yeah.
back to
yeah,
consulting medical practices.
exactly.
Yeah.
Hold on to these things.
Mercy. Yeah. So
um,
it's very important to realize that, you can do anything. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter what that
Yeah.
disability is. You can still do it. Put your mind to it and do it.
Absolutely,
Absolutely. And
100%.
and also just what we're all saying is just, don't be afraid to reach out to people.
Mhm.
There was a lot less people I could reach out to back in the day, but even like I've loved the connections I've made in the last year
Mhm.
on blind talk, just to the relatability. But yeah, no, and I think Murray, you said something that I totally agree on is just I'll often say I had to go through the pain to find the passion and then
Right.
the purpose. And I don't think I would trade that pain and just for all of the good that's but you don't know that. So anyone who's in that, I know it's really hard, but that's why a lot of us were here for you, no matter what, if you're a teenager, if you're going whatever age, um but
So, the pain, purpose, and passion that you just talked about, the three P's, I think would make for an excellent masterclass.
yeah, no, definitely, well, of course.
So, let's talk about that journey. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, tell us a little bit about the last kind of 24 months for you, the last 2 years, and what that was like.
Yeah. Well, 2 years ago, I was in a dream job, and it was, actually one of the projects that I was directing. So I was a senior legal advisor at a major international law and development organization. We had over 180 people around the world with projects, yeah, probably in 15 countries and the US. And I would be, overseeing and just making sure across the board we had stuff that was inclusive and accessible to people with disabilities in all the projects. But we also had some disability specific programs because it's called the twin track approach, and we see it here in the US as well, where we need to recognize all of the barriers and ableism that that having some of the programs that address some of those directly. And just I think one of the coolest things I got to do was a project. It came out, the call for applications came out about 2 months after Judy Human had passed away. And the project was really, we ended up winning it, and it was called Judy. And it was working with youth with disabilities in Moldova and Armenia, so 18 to 30 years old, on different types of advocacy, like related to creating reform. So system level advocacy, not just itself, you know, uh, but it was very cool. I have to just be honest, because I think as one of the things she had this quote once. I was at this workshop and somebody asked her a good question, and she just made a quote that I wrote in my notes right away, because I love doing that. But I knew like her passion towards building the next generation and all of that. So it was great. That was a project I loved. I loved all of our projects. And yeah, it was last January, really suddenly stopped with the new administration. I think that people, I don't know if we all had taken it as serious, or we don't think we expected it quite to be that, just because it's never been, and I'll be the first to say, anyone watching this, it wasn't a political thing. Both sides have, after since World War II, this part of our soft power. is, and to have not just humanitarian assistance, but development and, working around the world, as well as some of the stuff we had in the US. But it felt that some of it was really also specific to disability. So some of the programs that got cut right away were disability. So that was one of the words,
Yeah.
um, that they were just, they were using some AI thing, right? And if it came up, you know,
Well, I feel like let's just unpack that for a second because I think that's an important thing is
mhm,
the DEI space as a
mhm,
whole,
mhm.
disability falls in with. And so I feel like
Yeah.
early in this administration, disability, which is already at the bottom
Mhm.
of the DEI spectrum in the United States, um, got severely cut because it was
Yeah.
associated with DEI. And it's one of those things that people just don't understand, right? And so we don't do a good enough job in the space of
Yeah.
talking about how it impacts regular culture and mainstream culture.
Mhm.
And I think we need to, that's one thing that Judy did very, very well when
Yes.
she was leading the movement. And we've talked about Crip Camp on this
Mhm.
podcast a lot, and
Mhm.
just hearing her story around
Yeah.
how it happened and the hard things that she did to be able to build capacity and explain to politicians the mainstream outcomes that can happen
Yeah.
if disability is treated with respect. And that's one thing that's not happening right now. And so,
Right.
we lose good people like you on good projects that are doing
Yeah.
important work.
Yeah, no, and you actually make a really good point where you say, I'm going to say the words out loud just really quickly because I think there's actually some people that really truly don't know in this country. Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
DEI, and that I'm sure everyone watching knows, but I think part of the rhetorical attack on it is just let's
Yeah.
just vilify these words. One of the things you made notable is where you say, hey, disability is kind of like at the bottom end of that. That's true. Disability only fit in on DEI programs when it was convenient to cut us.
Right.
But were we necessarily benefiting? I mean, that was one of the things I just on in my personal space was trying to advocate for making sure, because it was just another space where I felt that disability was just excluded again. And yeah, so that happened, and exactly where I think Judy was able to, and others, really, but her
Yes.
her voice, her unapologetic. I'm going to tell it how it is. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I would run into her. So every year the convention has this, it's a meeting in New York City at the UN. And you see everyone from around the world come together, civil society, government. And I mean, she with her electric wheelchair, which I'm pretty sure that they gave her like a Ferrari version of, by the way,
Right.
because man, that she's just zoom, she would have me in the corner of like some random hallway being like, what are you doing right now? Because I'm thinking we need you in Mongolia. I was like, wait, what? It's just like I need an answer. I mean, and anyone who knew her and knew her, when I'd be writing emails, like, I always have something purple around now because of her favorite color. But like when you're writing a professional email to someone at her level, early in my career, and it's like to get her attention, I have to write the words in the subject purple in capital letters, and then
Yeah.
I get a response. I mean, she's a force of nature, and I think like for me, you'll hear me sometimes. I want to March 4th. I want to in her
Yeah.
honor, and I really want to. That's why it's so important if people watch Crip Camp, understand some of these things that right now are under attack. Really,
And again,
um,
if you haven't watched Crip Camp, it's a documentary on
Yeah.
Netflix.
yeah,
CRIPCAMP. Look it up, watch it. It's
yes,
essential for disability rights
yes.
and advocacy.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
and and it's also essential just for anyone in the whole global movement, really. I've had people from all types of countries who, when they saw it, they were like, "Wow, that was so cool." But yeah, that was the beginning of, that's what set fire to the rain of not just the US, but to the global. And I think one of the cool things about Judy is we sometimes think of Judy as having kind of three stages. There was becoming Judy, the powerhouse that she was early in her career. There was then working on US stuff and shamelessly saying, I mean, some of the times those videos of her where she's like, I'm not going to apologize anymore. I'm like,
Right.
now you guys know where I'm coming from, right? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
Right.
she was your mentor.
Yeah.
And
Starting to
then
make sense now.
there's the angle of her involvement at the global level with the CRPD, so it's
Mhm.
like those three phases that, and yeah, and I think that we all really, that's why I want to make sure people have a basic understanding. Look, not everyone has to be deeply knowledgeable about every single thing, but having the basic understanding, especially in the US and globally, our rights are under attack.
And it will
Absolutely.
make you passionate about your own rights if you watch
Yes.
Crip Camp. I can tell you, the last few weeks, I've been really staunch about disability rights and speaking out more
Yeah.
about things that annoy
Yeah.
me. And I think it's so
Yeah.
important that we don't just stay quiet about these things. We need to talk about them.
Yeah, and I
Exactly.
and if an advocacy looks different for everyone, I'll always say that, but if depending on your style, your personality type, your whatever, yeah, one way or nothing, another, do something. We need to
Yeah,
do something. Yeah.
100%.
Um,
So
so
you're in this transition. Your program got cut. Then
yeah, the industry gets cut. I'm kind of like, what do I do? Um, so naturally, I think to myself, I'll start a TikTok account because that's what most you know, human rights lawyers focusing on disability do is just, get on there and start yelling about things.
but you do a great job about that.
Without a
Yeah.
suit, whatever. So what happened was I started the account. I think I knew the writing was on the wall for the industry, for my job industry for a while. I live in a rural area, in terms of just starting to try to take on clients here. I would have to move. And that's not an option. So I thought to myself, let me start and see what I'm willing to talk about. And I'm happy that I kind of right away came up with something because I actually to this day I have some friends that are still struggling. I mean, it's a big shift, a seismic shift in an industry. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll start some sort of, Substack, which I probably still will do. I will see about podcast things. I'll see about this. I'll see about that. I just want to see what am I willing to share, not just about my disability, my blindness, my endometriosis, infertility, IVF. I mean, and I've come to the point where pretty much everything. If it's my story, if it's somebody in my
Right.
family story, that's not my story. Um, so yeah, that's where it sort of started. And then I started to really think about how can I be using my skills, my experience, and something that is just always, no doubt, it's come out the last 20 years is that people with disabilities, parents of kids with disabilities are allies. One of the biggest issues is just don't know their rights at all. Um, and disability rights are only as effective as people who have rights knowing they have them. If you don't know, you can ask for a reasonable accommodation in the workplace, then nothing happens. It also just allows for people to, you know, discriminate openly in ways. So I've done a lot of know your rights work. I mean, that's stuff I built into most of my career once I really started to notice that stuff. And I just decided, let me start putting together stuff. And yeah, at this point, so what it's resulted in is I have created an online course and advocacy community called the Disability Power Arena. There's also stuff that I'm outside of the arena that's available, but to people, there's going to be more stuff. But the arena itself is, I'm excited. I just launched it 15 days ago. It has self-learning guides in there on US law that's broken down. Basically, I've created it by looking at all the questions people have asked me in the past year and trying to create something that is a resource that helps people understand, break down these things that often seem really complex. And so far, there's the 3 modules. 2 more are just kind of in the process of finishing up. There's a bunch of stuff on the CRPD that's getting added over the next couple of days. So we have the self-learning resources. I am going to be creating some video stuff. So as people who, different learning styles can watch me as I go through some of the modules. But the next part of what's part of the arena, so it's a membership, a community. Everyone who's watching, get into the arena because we have fun. No. So it does have 4 different classes per month that are part of it. So we just did the first master class the other day, Foundations in Power, How Disability Rights Became Law. And it went really well because I don't talk about these things in the same way that other people do. It's not, I try to think I'm not dry. I kind of try to bring it to life and bring it from different angles. But yeah, so it's got the 4 classes, one of which is actually a pop culture night. So for example, looking at X-Men and just talking about what is that as an allegory for disability and just getting out of our own heads and helping people think about disability so that they're going to, learning rights but then also the more you're thinking about it, it helps build advocacy skills and also, really building confidence. And there is also an advocacy community that's part of the Arena membership in Telegram. So in
I joined.
short, yeah, go ahead.
I joined. I think it's really valuable. Again, looking at like Crip Camp and
Mhm.
looking at what's important to be able to understand what's come before us, what might come next for us, and being armed with the right information around that is really important. And so for me, definitely worth the 49.95
Mhm.
to be able to access Alison's extensive material,
Right.
and just experience in life across the world. Yeah, so I would highly recommend people join the Power Arena, Disability Power Arena, and be involved. It's a great opportunity
Yeah.
as well to then network. And we talk about networking and how important it is. Well, you've got some really heavy hitters in that disability community already joined into that
Mhm.
networking framework. So, yes, I definitely think if you love to see more of Alison and
Yes,
myself,
please. Yes, please. Yeah.
come talk to us in the arena.
Exactly. And Allison, I am behind the game on this because I have just been absent for
I know
about
you've been
2
busy. Yeah.
weeks.
I know you've been busy, but I was kind
uh,
of pointing at
it
you and
is,
I was like, get it.
yeah. But it is, things are getting a little bit more of normal life for me. Hopefully after the next
Yeah,
couple of days. So I'm playing catch up. So I am
no
going to dive
worries.
into it because I am very interested in that. And I also am very interested in how you can help me in my area here because I'm honestly not all that familiar with it. And I mean, you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
but I do know that there is a need in this area that I feel like I can gain knowledge from you
Yep.
that will better help me in my very rural area that is
Yes.
often very much forgotten about. So I'm very interested in diving into all of that, and I'm just trying to play catch up right now. So hang in
Yeah.
there with me.
No, no worries. And I'm glad you bring up it, the rural community thing, because it's really near and dear to my heart, always has been. Disability conversations in the US, Canada, globally are often very city centric. And even in terms of how that then results in the systems and in rural communities, lots of things we can be learning, sharing from each other, trying to figure out what are advocacy strategies to make sure that more resources are available. And we don't have to be in the
Exactly.
same state to have those conversations. So that's the reason I did
No.
create the advocacy community is I want people to be able to learn, share. I do have a dream of, right now there's an app called School, Skool, or Circle. There's a couple of apps I've used in the past that I was hoping to have that on because it gets really, it opens up the ability for people to really kind of be figuring out, hey, we could do this advocacy campaign, or here's these resources. I didn't realize how expensive it was per month for these things. So I do want to put it out there for everyone that this is just the beginning. And, I want this to expand and I want to expand with all of you. So if people please get into the arena, we wear sports jerseys or your favorite pop star for master classes. I was in a rugby jersey the other day.
That we
So
won't talk about.
no, I was actually in an Adirondack Mountaineers jersey.
Okay, well,
So
that's all right.
that's acceptable. I know. I know. I'll have to tell you the master class. I'll have to give you a heads up in advance if I'm going to wear the New Zealand. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. I'm going to have to counter
I
with some Australian jerseys, I think.
That's okay though.
Yeah.
That's the arena, and the name just the name comes from the idea. And of course, I probably spent more time thinking of the name than I have ever spent on a law review article in my life. Like I was like, oh, it's got to be me. It's got to be me. And then of course, next thing I know, I'm like singing the song. It's got to be me. And that's like then I'm like, wait a minute, arena tour. Like Pink and Taylor Swift's Eras tour and Ed Sheeran's going on an arena tour. And then I was like, wait a minute, hockey's at arenas and basketball. And then I was like, that's it.
There we
You know,
go.
and then I was like, I can play into it because again, I think that learning, especially it's called human rights education. Even though it's like disability rights, so disability rights education. For adults, take a lot of courses now, this or that. I know my people who are taking all of these interesting, gardening, this or that. So it's really out of interest. I know a lot of people with disabilities and parents of kids with disabilities are like, I'm not that interested. I'm like, you will be interested. We are going to
Right.
have fun in the arena. It is not, so.
If it's one
Um,
thing we can say, Alison, it's definitely that you're not dry.
Exactly, exactly. And I feel like I would learn so much more from you because of how you put it out there. It keeps me interested, and
Thank
will
you.
keep me, I love that.
I appreciate that because one of the things that I teach, I'll be teaching in the arena is called the ADK framework. And it's really funny. My brother was looking at one of my documents the other day and he's like, what is the ADK framework? And I didn't break it down in that particular document, but I was in Myanmar one time and they literally were like, you have a different kind of approach to everything. And then
We find that hard to believe. You're so
somebody,
vanilla.
somebody, somebody else was like, it's ADK. And then I was like, ADK is the Adirondacks. I was like, this is perfect, and ever since then, I have like this ADK framework to, so yeah, I'm looking forward to having you in there, TJ and Marie. Thank
Yes,
you. Thanks.
yes.
We're gonna have some fun, and anyone watching, please get in. It is. I want to keep it affordable. It's something that if I wanted to change who the audience was, it could be a much more expensive membership, and that's not what I want. I want this to be for people to be able to get in. I will say,
Right.
I think that the first 50 members we're going to have at the $49.99. After that, we probably will increase it $10, everyone, just so that we can give credit to what I'm calling the founding members. And right now we have
Good.
17 people. So right now, everyone get in there, get competitive.
Awesome.
But
Get
thank you,
Yes.
competitive.
thank you,
Now
thank
we
you
know your
guys.
backstory. Three-point shooters. You need to
Yeah.
come in.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah,
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
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 smack with Allison. We want some more three-point shooters.
I know. Well, now like people with the whole beef with Jesse Evans,
I
which
know.
got
Let's
really.
let's let's unpack this a little bit because I feel like I need to go purchase a referee's uniform. That's the first thing,
He's doing
and
it.
maybe we need to have a debate on here, TJ.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. I saw the beef between the two of you, and I said I was Switzerland. I'm not. I
I
wouldn't
saw
choose
that.
one
I
or the
saw that.
other.
I saw that. I saw that. And then we had people like JB Lawrence was like, well, I think that Jesse has the boys and this. And then, well,
Yeah.
Allison might like out brain power. And I'm like, Allison will go learn how to see again if there is a vision test. Allison will like, run around to the moon if it's a competition. So, yeah, no, we
Just
had to.
just remember, Al, that Jesse's husband has a chainsaw, so that's something
Yeah.
to remember because you can't put it past Jesse to get that chainsaw somehow and wreak havoc.
I just need to check on something. Hey, Bennett, can you get me a chainsaw?
Good times.
No,
That's so
no,
funny.
it was really good, and honestly, her episode was just so good, and it was really,
Yeah.
it's still very important for me to see these things, even though I'm at a place where it's just like radical acceptance and this and that, and I absolutely love. I've had this career of working cross disability, and it is so I love that, and I think that's so important that we're not just within our own disability types. We need to work together. But it's also amazing the relatability within the blind community, and then just the relatability with another Star Guardian, where it's like, wow, I couldn't imagine it. The teenager in me is like, no, how did that happen?
Right.
I
Right.
gotta tell you guys something funny though. Is my mom is sort of used to the fact that I am ridiculous. Like I text her sometimes and I'll be like, Duke is one of my dogs. Like, Duke said he's gonna look for a new grandmother. And like that's all she gets in a text, something that makes no sense. Like the middle of her day, she's like, what? Um, but she's kind of used to that. So she called me after she saw my video and she was like, 42 years with you and you've never punked me that good. She was like, I was starting to get so mad when I was watching that video that somebody stole your story and this and that. And then all of a sudden you flipped it. And she's like, I didn't realize. And it was so funny. And then
You got her good.
I don't know if people Stargardt, do you think, could you ask Jesse Evans, did she see the pink thing on your head? Because, maybe that was the one indicator. Yeah. So we had some fun.
And I have this
That's
theory,
funny.
Alison, that you have dogs so you can buy toys and pretend that they're your dogs, but really they're yours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Props and toys is what you live for, is what I think.
Okay, guys, I just want to go over the fidget toys. So yes and no. Okay, so because I also will tell you guys, I got into the fidget toys. I do feel very strongly about, but I was in Cambodia one year. We had people from 5 different countries, and I could just tell, in terms of as some of the stuff people were going through things that, you see people starting to play with their pens and do these different things. And my friend and I, one night went out and we found what we could in Phnom Penh, and we put them in the middle of each room and they went over super well. And one of the things at the end of the workshop evaluation was that helped people to focus, which this was in maybe 2015. So yeah, now it's actually something that I've always have as if it's in person and different things. But yeah, also with the dog toy. Yep, yes, you've got it. But yeah, no, this is just like one, bucket of, because you always have to have your Judy Purple squeeze thing.
Right.
Always, you're gonna like this one. You always have to have your Stitch tennis ball.
Well,
Right.
tennis. We're
This is
all
a
about
tennis.
tennis.
That's a tennis ball. You could try to play with it. I have a weird obsession with globes, like very weird. I'm obsessed with globes. They're all over my house. In
Like
case
world globes.
world globes,
Okay.
yes, and not maps because I don't want people to think that the world is flat.
Right.
Globes.
Right.
I know I do love maps as well, but I get worried that people will think that. Obviously, once in a while, you need your boxing gloves. Yes, they don't quite fit my hands, these little Armenian ones, but you gotta have those. I mean, yeah, but I do have, so I have the different kinds of things to show, like the different sensory toys. All jokes aside, I do have the stuff to be able to show it as well.
So
But
your
yeah,
house is basically like a sensory room, a big sensory
I
room.
have a lot of different
Yes.
things because I think that it's in, people, if I can destigmatize these issues,
Right.
which I'm pretty sure I can, because I know I have a lot of friends who still are dealing with people saying something to them if they're at work and they're, have something. So I'm like, I'm gonna help destigmatize this. And I also do find with my vision when my eyes start to get tired, I mean, there are things, like that helps because it gets my brain away from focusing on that kind of strain that happens.
Yeah.
And also with endometriosis, I mean, I'm always holding a squeeze toy when I'm dealing with the pain. So I've learned, to have fun with it. But yeah, but yes,
So
Yeah.
the
what
dogs also, their toys are mine. Yep.
I wanted to ask you about endometriosis because my sister has it. I have another good friend that has it, and it's probably a disease that's not talked about too much, to be honest with you. And
Mhm.
I'd love for you to have a platform to talk about it.
Yeah, endometriosis does, I mean, there's not enough information that talk about the medical field really missing the point, because it's 1 in 10, at least 1 in 10 women have it, and it may affect differently, but for me, that has been really a hard journey. It was, I guess, sort of dormant. There's some things that I remember could have been whatever in my teen years, early 20s. But I'm just the person that, just put on hormonal pill and it remains dormant. But when I started, in my job and I was no longer taking that, just the symptoms and the things that came on so fast, the pain, the vomiting, I mean, the symptoms, so many different things. And any doctor I would see, it's like there's this not a holistic thing in terms of a woman's body. It's like, well, that's a GI symptom, that's a this symptom, that's a that symptom. So I mean, endometriosis is still taking about 7 or 8 years to diagnose, which is absurd, absolutely absurd. And in the same vein, we were talking about eye doctors. I mean, doctors will, with full confidence, say awful things to women.
Yes.
Awful
Yes.
things, make you think that it's all in your head, etc. So it was really that in 2019, and I was traveling the world, and I'd be on planes. I had no idea what was going on. I'd just be vomiting and pain, and like, and being in my mind, like, gotta be. I'm a real tough kid. I can handle my, like, but
Yeah.
I didn't know. So the diagnosis, so, was an excision surgery in 2019, just get it. I woke up from the surgery, and this is what I remember is the nurse being like, okay, you've asked me 22 times. So while I was under, coming off the anesthesia, I was like, where's my mommy? Do I have endometriosis? I said that 22 times. I asked, where's my mommy? Do I have endometriosis? And like the woman's like, okay, I don't know if you're gonna remember this 22nd time. Your mommy is on her way. And yes, we found a lot of endometriosis lesions. We removed them. Um, so that, I mean, that definitely, it's life-changing to have the diagnosis. So it's to know what it is, because it is,
Yes.
you have no idea. And then I've had one other excision surgery, and I'm considerably better, I will say, than before. But there are times where it can still just, and it can come on so quick.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I think people have really no awareness. It's kind of like I
Mhm.
feel like it's like I'm just, oh yeah, I'm just making this up. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really underrated, and I
mhm,
don't know that enough women talk about it or
yeah,
are comfortable enough
mhm,
to speak
yeah,
about it, just because it's one of those things. But I also went through the very same path that you did, and I'm older than you, a good bit older than you to know that when I was in those teenage years, there was, I mean, you didn't speak of it. And it was
No.
just, I would be in the bed,
Hmm.
for 3 days. And it was just because
Yeah.
that was what was supposed to happen.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so later, as things evolved and
Hmm.
as I got older and, I got married and wanted to have a child, we were having trouble. And so then we found out what was going on. I had
Hmm.
a laparoscopic surgery, like you said, to remove lesions and that sort of thing. And then started fertility drugs. And 2 years after starting that particular drug is when I got pregnant. And
Hmm.
so it took a long time,
Yeah.
for that to happen. And it was a journey because
Yeah.
I felt like no one was listening to me.
Hmm.
But I don't know that at that time when I was growing up, I don't know how prevalent it was enough for them to really know about it, to
Right.
diagnose it, to have a name for it. So much like our vision things, right? So,
Yeah.
so that was a part of my life
Yeah.
that I went through as well. And then, following that, being on medicine to not have those flares every month and
Hmm.
that sort of stuff, and kind of how my journey's gone since then, into now where I am in menopause. So
Hmm.
I've kind of cleared that whole gap
Yeah.
and with the help of things. So there is light at the end of the tunnel, but I will
I'm
say that there's
hoping.
not a whole lot,
Yeah.
about unless you find your circle of people that can
Yeah.
talk about it and give you their experience. It's kind of like the blind talk community. Like,
Yeah.
you feel
No,
isolated
th-
otherwise.
that's
There's
so
so many
true.
instances, right, of this thing happening is where everyone feels so isolated in their own world and they feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's no community. Like, I think I'd love to hear, to finish off, both your opinions around, and I'm glad we talked about endometriosis. I
Yeah.
think
Thank you
we
for bringing that up. Yep.
need to talk about
Yeah.
it more. And when, as I said, my sister and I are very close, and just going through some of the things she's gone through, it's such a painful disease
Hmm.
and diagnosis that people do need to know that it's real and it does exist, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some solutions for it, which is
Yeah, and
important.
if I could just let everyone know, because this is actually one really positive thing that happened that this year or earlier this year for the first time ever, they have defined it. So it's no longer like a reproductive thing. And for people who have it, like my version, where I wouldn't have even known it was endometriosis. By the time I had my first surgery, I was every single day not okay. But it has now been reclassified to be a multi-organ, systemic, chronic inflammatory disease. And I think that is at least one win, is that we're moving to
Yes.
say that they're finding it. So for example, with TJ, I think that all of us, there's so little research or knowledge, but no doubt I look forward to hopefully when everything turns off, that it turns off, but they don't know. It's like we're going to continue to learn because of where it was on my body and is on my body.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I'm thankful that all of the advocacy has at least reclassified it. So it's like,
For sure.
they have found it everywhere, the brain, lungs, so
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. It is
So
very important.
I was just going to say, to close off, let's talk about the community, because I think
Mhm.
it's important to involve everybody in our discussions, and we've gotten such a lot of positive feedback,
Hmm.
and everybody's listening in, which we're really appreciative
Yeah, it's
of.
awesome.
Um, what's the one or two things that you think you've gotten most from the community over the last year, Alison?
Man, the humor.
Yeah.
Like
Well, do
being
you
able
bring that? To be
No, no,
honest.
but like also just other people's, and just being like, oh man, there's a lot of good stuff. I also think just I love seeing how everyone talks about this experience that we have, and it's different, because it is a spectrum, right? And some people have a lot more usable vision than all the way to our completely blind friends. But just how people do different things. I've learned a lot from like Joe Rose when she does some of the things that she's talking about her day to day. I mean, there's certain things
Yes.
that she has shared that I'm like, oh, the possible, she uses the big possible or certain things. So the food's not, I mean, absolutely love that. So it's like the learning that I can get even where I'm at in my story is really helpful.
Hmm.
And I think I learned something new every day. But yeah, definitely also really, I think we should do this, by the way, if we could start this, is I love when I say the humor is that every single person on Blind Talk brings and approaches things in such a different way. And part of it is because of our blindness and low vision and how we can edit or not edit that easily, how we do music, how we don't do, how we, some people do talking heads, like I do a lot of talking heads. I know TJ, you do as well. Well, we all do here, Murray. But some people who, Ruby Red, who does the amazing voiceovers and the B-rolls, and Jesse Evans does, her edits and stuff are, so like, so, but we all do stuff differently. It's like, could you imagine if we like every week picked a topic, like this week we're like, everyone do blindness as a spectrum, do your own thing. That's it. That's the only rules. Everyone would do it differently, from the editing, the style, to the substance, and that's what I really like, because if you're scrolling through anything online, there's so many people in the world that just kind of are copying each other, and we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So yeah,
exactly. Authenticity in each and
yeah.
every person that I have found. And that's so refreshing, because I learned so much from them. And my algorithm, I don't know why, but it'll drop me off in the most random places sometimes. And I'm like, how did I get here?
Oh, I know.
It just drops me off everywhere. And I'm like, get me back to where I belong.
I know. There's times that it, like, on night I'm like, how did I end up on this thing where it keeps showing me some celebrity that's a vampire? What did I click?
Right. Well, my friends are guilty of doing that. My fully sighted friends who send me videos that they think are, hilarious and that I would love. That's how, when I open them, sometimes I'm like, I'm not opening that, because I'm not going to go, I don't want to be on that side.
You're like, I don't want to start that. Yeah.
But yeah, I love I have learned so much from everybody as well. I'm thankful that, I do have central usable vision left, but I'm on a day to day, and I don't ever know what's going to happen. And so I always try to prepare and look forward to the what ifs and the, possibilities of things for me. And so I find everyone in this community has taught me something that I didn't even think about, and what they do and how they've navigated it. So I love it so much. And I've met so many just wonderful people who were so forthcoming with information, because when I started, I didn't know if I should do it or not. I was really on the fence. And I know that's come up a lot over this last week that I've been trying to catch up. And Jesse kind of talked about it too, about, when I first started, what was in my head, it exceeded expectations. So when I first decided to share my story on here, and then it was like, it opened up so much more for me. And I'm like, why didn't I do this before now?
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think it means a lot to all of us too, when we share our story, or I'm sharing something more kind of like educational or whatever, when people get something from that. But in particular, my story, because it's like, and I know for all of us, our stories that have a lot of pain built in, a lot of things that you never could have imagined. Why is this happening to me? And then having that positive thing that, well, if that's helping somebody else, then and also at the same time, I love when I go to bat with ableism with some of my just like yelling at the thing and whatever. I mean, I absolutely love some of the comments. They're great. Like, so it's
You do like a little bit of competitive banter. I like that about you.
The first time I did a video doing that, I was surprised how well it did. Like, I just didn't, I had no idea what I was doing on TikTok. You know what I mean? But I was like, wait, if I just talk the way I kind of talk, and that resonates with people, because again, we're so used to just this ableism and told we can't do anything, or people not yelling back at it, that I'm like, okay, that's no problem. I got it, guys.
I do like the authentic content. I think you have to be authentic, right? Because there's a lot of people who struggle with losing their vision and, kind of a bit depressed about it. And that's okay. Come on and talk about that and be who you are. But it's also great for people who have been through that journey and now are out the other side to some degree, who can, take a lighthearted look at themselves and have some fun. And we have to enjoy life, and I think that's the thing is, anything that you like to do, you got to be passionate about. And that comes through with a lot of the content of the creators in the community. And that's what I love.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Me too.
you get this one life, and whatever the cards are that you have, whether it's the endometriosis, the Stargardts, the other things, I just want to have fun when I can have fun. And,
Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
TJ, any last questions for Alison?
Um, no, I really don't think so. You've covered everything that I was questioning because I was wondering about your college experience and that sort of thing and how that went for you because I somehow have connected with a few younger
yeah,
girls in Blind Talk, and one is little Sydney, and she is at college with her guide dog, and I love seeing that. I did
yeah,
that. My eye disease skipped that portion of my life, right? So I
right.
didn't, I didn't know until later in life. So I can't relate, and I find it so informational how she navigates that. And so I love that she has been able to put it out there but she's also cutesy and shows her, herself
Yeah,
getting ready and she, getting
yeah.
concert tickets and, things like that. So I love her. And so my questions more or less were along the college life and how, because I know how we have navigated as adults our age, but when your younger years and how you got into
Yeah.
your field and that sort of thing. So those were my biggest questions and about the arena. So I'm glad
Bum,
you kind of
bum,
gave me a
bum.
little bit heads up on that.
The dance party. No, I appreciate
Yeah.
I appreciate your questions. You both asked really great questions about some of those formative years in high school and
Yeah.
college that I don't necessarily talk about as much on TikTok just because of getting into it. There's some things that it's hard to unless I do 500 videos a day.
Right.
But
You're nearly there.
yeah, well, the cool thing about TikTok is because it goes out to new people each time, you can pop out
Yeah.
stuff. It's just then, well, am I going to confuse the algorithm if my content switches just a little here or there, whatever? I don't know. Sometimes
Mhm.
I overthink it, and sometimes I just am like, "Meh, whatever."
Well,
Um,
I also too to your point on that. I don't mean to interrupt, but to your point, all about changing how the world sees us is to make sure that everyone sees us. So,
yes,
so for me, sometimes my content when I'm tagging, my Gen Xers and
hmm,
and things like that, if they go to my page and they start seeing the things
yeah,
about the
sure,
podcast and the vision loss and the things like that.
yeah,
I feel like it kind of attracts a different kind of people that I really want to reach. Yes,
yeah,
I want to talk to
absolutely,
people and reach people in my stuff, but hey,
yeah,
if we're going to change the world, we got to reach other
absolutely.
Can I tell
people.
you a funny
I love
story?
that.
So
Yeah,
I was transitioning, flying through Seattle to Las Vegas for work, and I hardly ever eat McDonald's, but I got a quarter pounder meal, and it was like this. I'm old, so back in the day, the quarter pounders were like big, right? And now they're like a cheeseburger, and I'm
yeah,
like, this is BS. There's no way that this is a quarter pound of beef. And so I hashtag McDonald's into my post and put the thing, and they
yeah.
came for me. The McDonald's people
They
came
came for you.
for me. I
Oh,
had
yeah.
thousands and thousands of comments saying it's a quarter
Wow.
pound before cooking. Don't you know that? Everybody
Wow.
knows that, and they were like full on.
Does everybody know that?
Well, I
This
guess if
this
you're a McDonald's person and you
you know that
hashtag McDonald's,
Right.
you need to know that,
the things that some people do know, right?
right? And
Yeah.
and then the other day I was on the little cart, the drive-through cart at Costco because I was on crutches and I hated it, and so I didn't want to walk around on crutches, so I got one of those carts. And then I had all the Costco people come in and talk about the mood ring and the things like that. And so it's very true. Like your different things that you get off
Mhm.
the track with, you get
Yeah.
that fanatical community coming
Sure.
around,
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Exactly.
and they
And
have firm opinions, my friends.
oh,
Firm
Yes.
yo.
opinions.
Oh, let me tell you some of the videos, especially some of the ones last year when I was standing up in solidarity with the autism community. I can't even tell you some of the things that it's not just filtered, it's filtered unwanted. If you don't know what that is, if you never had, don't look. But I had one that had 600 unwanted, and I at the
Oh,
time
wow.
I was new. Yeah, people were the things they were telling me. I was new, so I hadn't yet realized like if you really want to be putting stuff out, you really can't be consumed by the negativity because then you're going to
Right,
start doing stuff for them as opposed to.
right.
But
Mm-hmm.
man, yeah, sometimes. But yeah,
You got
just
to
going
have
back.
fun with it. The
Mhm.
McDonald's people, I just played with. That was my daily fun. I just like post things that would tick them off even more.
Yeah.
That would make my day, to be honest with you.
Well,
So,
and you also can just write, thank you so much for your beautiful comment and engagement, which I have started to do. But yeah, no, the reason, thank you guys for asking about the college, because I don't talk about it as much as but it is 100% what made me in ways. It really is, you know, my story is having to go through it, having to find my ability to advocate, having a mom who could beat up people for me until I could, metaphorically.
Mhm.
And also just, there's a part of me that wants to say thank you to like every single person that made me feel like I had to prove myself, which no one does, by the way. Anyone listening, you don't have to prove yourself because of,
Nope.
jerks in society, but they gave me a drive and a passion that's like you can't ever end, stop. So
Yeah,
and that really started in those high school and college years.
Well,
that's
Allison
awesome.
DeFranco, Disability Rights, we thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, episode 8.
Do we
Join
have
the
any?
Power Arena.
Yes.
Do that.
Can we do a little dance to like sign off?
A little dance.
A little dance. Yeah, I don't know. We have to have music next time. We'll have to
We're
do this again.
gonna put the strobe light colors. I
Yes.
remember
Yeah.
I remember after the Super Bowl, you posted that video of Bad Bunny, and you're like dancing with the lights. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that was really funny. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I had so much fun. I would be happy to join
Us too.
anytime. If you want to have me and Jesse Evans,
Oh
brawl
yeah, we
it out.
gotta get those two together.
Duke it out.
National
Yeah.
debate around who has Stargardts the most, I guess, right?
I don't even think it would be
Mhm.
debate. We could just have a comedy show.
Yeah, that'd be entertaining for ratings. We'll definitely think about that.
For sure.
All right, you guys are doing such a great job. I absolutely love the podcast, and I'm so thankful to be here today. And I'm happy to come on any
Thank
other
you.
time.
Thank you so
We
much,
thank you.
Alison. We'll
All
be
right.
back with episode 9, everybody.
All right, thanks, guys.
Bye.
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 So